Good afternoon, good morning, everybody in our audience. I'm Catherine Weller from CISL Centre for Business Transformation, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's topic, which is nature-based solutions, although we'll mostly be using the abbreviation NBS. Now, this topic is very topical. In Glasgow at COP26, there was a lot of focus on how we can't win the fight against climate change without investing in nature. And we also repeatedly heard an emphasis on how climate, people and nature are intricately connected. And this is very true in relation to NBS. Now, what are they? Just a reminder. They are actions to protect, sustainably manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems that address societal challenges and simultaneously provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. And we'll go on to talk shortly about some examples of these projects. Today, with my three panelists, we're going to explore how companies might face into the challenges of pursuing such projects in their value chain. And by that, I mean not simply buying carbon credits from NBS projects, no. Today, we're talking about implementing NBS in companies' spheres of influence, perhaps as part of their efforts to reduce their Scope 3 emissions. And specifically, we're interested in how a company gets internal approval to engage with and spend money on an NBS project. In other words, what it takes for a company to get NBS ready. We are very grateful at CISL for the funding from the We Mean Business Coalition that has enabled our Get NBS Ready project. And just to give you all a heads up that the output with the findings from this project will be available in March, so watch out for that. But I want to kick off the discussion today by welcoming our panelists. Adrian Greet. After a long career at Mars, including in their global sustainability team, and more recently as the director of the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, Adrian can talk to how conversations happen inside big companies. He is now generously giving the benefit of all his experience to CISL and others as an advisor. And Nadine McCormick, currently manager of the Nature Action project at WBCSD, she is supporting companies on their journey to become nature positive. Nadine has more than 15 years' experience of working with companies to put nature at the heart of their decision making, particularly when it comes to incorporating natural capital thinking. And Tom Divney. Tom has been highly involved in CISL's project on what it means for companies to get NBS ready. And he has over 30 years' experience of hands-on work with small businesses, with large transnational companies, and with international agencies in Latin America and other developing countries. Welcome to you all. Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on questions and comments that our live audience put in the chat on GoToWebinar or LinkedIn Live. So, a message to you all. Please do submit any questions and we will try and get through them all by the end of this session. So let's kick off. And first, a provocation. Is it right to say that it can be in business's interest to pursue NBS projects? Perhaps our panelists could give our listeners some examples of where a business has gone ahead with NBS. Nadine, would you like to start?
Sure, I'll kick us off, and I just want to say hi to the folks on LinkedIn. So everyone's different parts of the world here. Hi from halfway between Geneva and Lausanne in Switzerland. So yeah, nature-based solutions, we've heard a lot recently in terms of the climate debate. Is it in business interest to pursue nature-based solutions? Well, it's not just business interest, it's society's interest, right? And so it's more than just climate mitigation that nature-based solutions help provide benefits. And I think as businesses more and more appreciate their dependencies on nature, the ecosystem goods and services that nature provides, then they start realizing the benefits. So to give you a good example, like depending on wherever you are in the world, whether it's coral reefs or sand dunes or mangroves or salt marshes, they all act to absorb the energy of waves, which help protect built environment and other infrastructure from erosion and storm surges. And so the importance and therefore the value of these ecosystems when they're functioning well is increasingly being recognized by insurance companies as well as local authorities, tourism companies, etc. So yes, it's right, it's in business interest, but other stakeholders who are in those landscapes. Yeah, that'll do for now.
Thanks, Nadine. Tom, do you have any good examples of where it's in the business's interest?
Yeah, greetings from Costa Rica, where there are more dogs than people, I think, right now. If you can hear any in the background, I'm sorry about that. I think it's not only sustainability teams, but also from an operational or engineering side, the companies are very much interested. I'm thinking of an example of, say, a water utility company or a bottling plant or a company that works heavily dependent on water. Integrated catchment watershed management projects are super interesting because it allows, it permits a number of benefits such as increasing replenishment of the aquifer, flood control, even reducing nutrient loads for those companies that need to treat water before it's returned to the environment. So I think there are a number of great practical examples out there of how NBS can help companies.
And Adrian, what about you?
Yeah, I better let everyone know where I am. I'm just outside London in the UK, so hi everyone. I think I would echo the points we've made, but I think also if you look within an organisation, particularly ones which have an agricultural foundational basis, I think the procurement teams play an incredibly strong role. They naturally understand the focus they're looking for is product quality and reliability and security of supply and cost, obviously. But they're more and more recognising that NBS options are there to help deliver the challenges they're facing, the priorities they're trying to address within their supply chain, and are part of the commitments that businesses are already making on a global basis. And there are good examples out there. I guess many businesses haven't maybe called them NBS in the past, but they're already doing this on a daily basis across the supply chain. It's always a bit mean to pick specific examples because there's so many other good ones out there, but one I'm really impressed with is Kellogg's have made a fantastic position in support of holistic integrated pest management. That is working closely with their supply chain to roll that out and has made some big commitments in that space. And that's them as an industry leader driving that focus. But there's also farmers themselves are taking action directly and changing how they farm. WFO have a great piece of work about the Climakers, and that's work on the ground addressing carbon challenges, but they're driving that. And also there's a good piece of work from in the US on carbon cowboys, and they're really changing the way they graze their cattle in a much more carbon positive way. And those then can be then absorbed and integrated into the total carbon footprint of the suppliers for the customers who take those products back in. So it is there. It's happening, I think, has been referenced at a landscape level on a broad industry level basis, but also it's happening directly in people's supply chains already today.
That's interesting. So we've name checked a few examples, but Adrian, would you say that NBS are routinely considered as solutions to problems that businesses are facing?
Routinely, that's a broad question. I guess the reality is more and more so, yes, but generally no. I think it's people are looking for efficient solutions to drive change and to achieve the targets as quickly as they can, to make progress as quick as they can. And a lot of the validation of the potential solutions with an NBS basis are still being validated. But it is that validation that's underway. I think we've crossed the threshold of understanding it's necessary. We understand this as a holistic need within our own business and in our own sectors. And we're trying to find great solutions that deliver a much more holistic outcome. So is it routinely there? Probably not, probably because of the scale of efficiency. Other solutions that have been developed for a very long time are by definition often seen as cheaper. But when you actually understand the total cost of ownership, these are more seen as real positive solutions that can be directly applied. It's definitely growing.
It's growing. Would you agree, Tom?
In part, yes. I think it's not, I agree with Adrian, it's not quite mainstream yet. I think what happens and what we've seen in the CISL research, we mean business research, that many companies are still getting delayed by the decision-making process. They're still using traditional business criteria framework to evaluate these projects, to decide if they're going to be using them. But the problem is they don't quite fit that. And as Adrian mentioned, there are still a lot of unknowns about results delivering, and I think it means expanding a time frame, changing mindset, and recognizing that in the long term, businesses have to be partners as part of the combat climate change impacts. I think that's very important.
You talked about mindset there, and one thing I thought we could touch on is the scrutiny that NBS have been under, particularly at COP26, although I guess that was a bit more related to links to carbon markets and offset credits. But Nadine, do you think that all that buzz has impacted on companies' perception of NBS?
I think it really depends where particular companies are on their journey on sustainability more broadly. So definitely for some companies who are newer to the journey, it was a bit of a wake-up call, but they realized that their approach, on climate mitigation was potentially at the expense of nature. And so the example that's always given is like a company that's just going to plant, a giant plantation of trees, no consideration of the species, the local communities around, etc. So this is giving bad press. But what it's done is to help companies that say newer to kind of understand, oh, right, I hadn't realized that there were links between nature and climate. And so now we're all talking about two sides of the same coin. I think there's a massive learning journey last year. I think the scrutiny as well for companies who are a bit more advanced in this space as well, who are perhaps just looking beyond their own value chain through market mechanisms. There's an increasing appreciation that actually that this can be done within their own value chains as well now, or actually even on land that's owned by the company themselves. And so this is sometimes called insetting as well, as opposed to offsetting, insetting. But really, I mean, we've kind of gone down the climate mitigation path. And I want to bring us back to what you said at the beginning, Catherine. This isn't just about climate mitigation. There can and should be like many co-benefits for when NBS are done well. And so on that line of getting, the maximum benefits for people and nature as well as climate, earlier this year, the NCS Alliance, it's the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance. It's a multi-stakeholder group with business and other stakeholders, co-convened by the World Economic Forum and the WBCSD. They actually launched some guidance laying out what high quality nature-based solutions in the context of carbon market credit looks like. So when we say high quality, I mean, we're simply saying that they should achieve and demonstrate net positive benefits for the environment as well as social benefits. That they need to have clear, robust and transparent accounting methodologies, which then when starting reporting on this can hopefully try to breach some of this trust that's been lost. But then these quality criteria, they're not just applicable then for that, the offsetting, the external to the value chains, but they're also relevant in setting as well, because I think as companies, leading companies are appreciating that we need an integrated approach on climate, nature and people. They're starting to realize that nature-based solutions, when done well, provide those co-benefits for climate, nature and people.
Adrian, I can see you nodding. Is that your experience as well?
I think it is. And I think for me, it talks to Tom's point that maybe that the approval process isn't ready. I think the approval process is a fairly simplistic business approach, a benefits case and understanding of achievement towards targets. But I think what Nadine's relating is actually it's those broader benefits at a local level to different stakeholders across the supply chain that are part of that rich benefit, that rich value that NBS offers. And I guess that's the bit that we're just trying to get clear, is to work out where that is. The challenge, I think, is often global businesses want global solutions, but nature is by definition a global issue, or it's a local issue globally. So all the changes happen at a local level. So you have to understand the benefits at a local level, and they'll be very different based on geography and soil type and culture and whatever. So I think Tom alluded to like water projects, landscape level projects are absolutely the way these things are going to get done. We are busy trying to really realize the value that Nadine is alluding to in her comments. I think we're making good progress in that space.
Okay, well, we're getting into the challenges surrounding this. And of course, our webinar's subtitle is corporates overcoming the fear of the uncertain and the unknown. So I want to ask you all what we mean by that. So for you, when it comes to actually getting MBS projects approved, what uncertainties do you think are most problematic? I guess let's continue with you, Adrian.
I guess it is for me a very simple cost benefits case at the most simplistic level, but to try and bring a value consideration to that is the important thing. I think that a business can make and does make very strong commitments to what it's achieving globally, but it then has to find strategies and progress across the various elements of supply chain to get there. I think the uncertainty is just really trying to turn that value, that broader value, into a comparable with another project, so that the money is then prioritized into project A instead of project B. At the end of the day, the pot is this big in terms of what you're investing this year, and everyone within that business is fighting for a piece of that pie. So I think the uncertainty is just really around, is that value there? And I think what we're realizing is the holistic nature of this, the value potential is so broad and across many different stakeholders. It's about whether you turn that into you turn that into an actual dollar value outcome or not, through some sort of process or methodology that enables you to do that comparative nature. And I think that's where the help is needed. How do we demonstrate the value of these projects, the broader value and the broader benefit to the organization that achieves the targets but achieves much more, but maybe is difficult to put down to an absolute dollar to dollar versus dollar comparison.
Okay, so if you haven't got that, is there a way of overcoming it to get started already?
Is that still to me?
Yes.
I think there's lots of reasons why these MBS projects are important to drive forward. And whether your leadership are committed to these targets, you can show this is a strategy to get there, or whether you recognize, and I think you must recognize, that your stakeholder expectation, regulation and legislation, and your responsibility across your whole supply chain is going to be coming at you squarely, and you're going to be expected to make the changes. So you need to move forward quickly to get ahead of the curve on these things. I think there's lots of justification why these sorts of projects are the right way forward, the right ones to prioritize. And you have to accept that you're not going to get to an absolute dollar valuation on the benefits. Some of it will be subjective, will be assumptive, but I think the numbers are there. Where the challenge is to demonstrate those are really overachieving some of the targets you go after in terms of cost benefits. If they get very close to a threshold, I think that's where I've seen the most difficult conversations, because they really want to know the numbers are there. And if they're close, you need to like the 9th decimal point to try and prove it. And that's of no value to anyone. The value is there. The numbers are very big, but you have to find a way to agree a methodology to turn that valuation into an agreement.
Great. Okay, Tom, what about you? What do you see business decision makers struggling with?
I think, and it very much connected to what both Nadine and Adrian have mentioned, it's the unknown, it's the uncertainty. Nature is not a predictable entity. You know, we're getting better at it, but we still don't know everything we need to know about ecosystems, biodiversity, climate, how soils work. These things are, I mean, if we knew everything, then a lot of university professors would be looking for jobs. I think so that's important, and what results can be achieved, how much, getting back to the dollar value, keeping in mind that you know, these are all things that businesses need to know. It's very new for a lot of companies out there. They don't have the in-house capacity to deal with these things, and so also new for them is, how do I do this? Do I work with a partner? You know, and that's another unknown for them. So I think all of those things we have to consider, and companies have to get a little bit more comfortable with the unknown and the uncertainty.
That's true, because at the end of the day, people are all individuals and they have their own doubts, their own needs. How do you help colleagues get more comfortable then, Tom?
I think you have to start looking You have to learn about your colleagues a little bit. You know, what's their value proposition? What's interesting for them? How do they learn? You know, we've always understood that, you know, some of us work better visually, others can read. So how do you present your information? Make a lot of examples available. Some people are very comfortable working with data. The problem is when you're starting out in NBS, the results come slowly. So you may consider compiling different results, different metrics into an index, I'm sorry, that would give a faster view of progress. So they understand also how all these things are connected. It's like looking at regenerative agriculture and soil carbon. Soil carbon is the ultimate goal there. It's also restoring soil health, maintaining or increasing productivity. So a number of things are going on there. These are complex topics, but you need to figure out how your audiences will react to these different types of information and what's the best way to package them. I think that's super important. Now, one of the big things I think is also looking at what's the cost of the opportunity cost of the status quo. And I think Adrian mentioned that you know everybody's interested in putting a dollar value on this. What's or monetary value? What's the value of not doing NBS? What's the risk to your business, to your supply chains, if you're not doing something to counteract the potential impacts of climate change? And I think that's one way to stimulate everybody and to get them looking and say, gee, if we don't do something, even if we don't know all the results, that's better than just sitting here. And at least we'll be making some progress and making our business more future-proof.
Again, that's a change of mindset. And Nadine, I'll bring you in on that because I know you've plenty of experience with that.
Yeah, one of my favorite subjects. And actually, I think what we're touching on today is some of the barriers we hear are definitely technical. Yep, they're probably half of those barriers are technical, but the other half of the barriers, they really are back to this. What we're trying to do is change systems, and all systems are ultimately made up of individuals. Just Tom, like you were saying earlier on, like, you know, even people in business, they're actually human beings. And how are they making decisions? What mindset are they coming in with? So I think one element to bring into this is where is that individual that you're speaking to? How aware are they of nature? I saw some really good comments in the chat box here in LinkedIn now, just saying, you know, it's linked to consumer awareness. Like, we're all rapidly learning what this space looks like. We've just about got climate change now. Well, what does nature look like in natural systems? We've watched Blue Planet. We're now watching the next one with David Attenborough. And so as that awareness comes along, there's still within a company, there's a different awareness as well. And so what I've seen in my work is that you get asked very different questions, whether somebody's coming from I'm being asked about this by my bank. My bank is asking because it's about a safeguards issue. This is about managing risk versus, I think we could actually do some good here. It will do benefit for our business, but actually it's also going to be really good for the stakeholders in the landscape, a totally different mindset. And so perhaps be honest and think about, if you're working in a company or with a company, be honest about where are they on that journey, and then pitch it then, I guess, accordingly. And maybe a reference to think about, and I'll throw it into the LinkedIn box here now as well, is we did a piece of work with Forum for the Future recently on just and regenerative mindsets of business, and a compass to help kind of you navigate and see where you are on that. And so I think really, again, nature-based solutions, when they're done well, they solve societal challenges at scale, which are also a benefit for the business too and communities, and they can't be done on your own. And this is not about making a profit at the end of the day. This is about that greater good. Paul Polman talks about net positive as well in terms of impacts that business can have. And so, yeah, this is, leading companies get this. My question is, for all of us, how do we bring others more rapidly on that learning journey so they realize that, profit maximization isn't good enough, risk management isn't good enough. Like, the nature-based solutions offer a way for business to contribute, not just to future-proof their supply chains and their value chains, but more broadly for society as well.
Adrian, I can see you're itching to leap in there.
Yeah, no, it's great to hear the conversation. I think as a strategy to help progress this, I think partnership is a really powerful tool. This thing of if you want to go far, you go with others. But working in partnership also helps spread the cost of this and de-risks that choice you're making. And Tom's right, there's a lot of knowledge and understanding that needs to be there. So be involved with the program, with the work that CISL is doing. You can step in and ensure your specific needs are actually met or prioritized or considered and are answered as part of the work. And at the same time, you're building your own and your business's knowledge on this whole topic. And then, I've come from Director General Site Platform, and that is about collaborative working. And collaborative working is really happening there. And we've heard that business is a sort of a new kid on the block. Regen Ag is equally a new terminology that's heavily being progressed. And what Site Platform is doing is really ground truthing the activities and the actions for regenerative agriculture. And the same thing will be true of this. We will ground truth them in specific areas and then work out what can be applied on a more global basis. You can't simply pick it up and move it. There's that global local challenge. But you can understand and you can apply the same approaches and methods. But if you're challenged internally to get things approved, then you can actually reduce a lot of that risk by working with others, some of which will be ahead of you, you can steal from. If you're one of these people who are not involved today, you can be part of that solution and utilize the thinking that's already been done and bring that much more quickly into your own organization. It's a really powerful way to make progress quickly.
That's interesting, talking about partners, but some other questions are focusing on when you are a company and you don't have direct impacts on land, or maybe you don't own any land, and how then could you do NBS? Nadine, have you seen any examples of that?
Yeah, well, I guess this often, if we think about our value chains, and so we're now like not primary, probably secondary, tertiary level of value chain. So one of the next questions is, well, who are you supplying from? Somebody is on the land somewhere. And so one of the starting points is actually to have greater transparency then in your supply chain. And so, yeah, one of the questions, but I just buy it. I can't possibly know. It was actually, you can. And so actually, this is one of your first steps. And we're talking about nature-based solutions here, but just in general, getting ready for science-based targets for nature to match SBTI for climate. You need to know your scope 3. You need to know where you're coming, where you're supplying from. And so actually building on some of that information you're getting on the climate side might provide an opportunity to identify potential landscapes that you could invest in, back for that insetting that we talked about earlier. So yeah, first step is like know where you're sourcing from.
And I guess that goes to one of the questions, just to clarify, we've been asked, is nature-based solutions about giving value to ecosystems that help business, or restoring ecosystems to enhance businesses, or both? Well, I think it depends on your perspective, doesn't it?
Well, value is such a laden word, right? If we say value is something where we give importance to something, we recognize it's valuable, therefore it's important. At the end of the day, what do we want? We want a nature positive, net zero and equitable world. How do we get there? We need to reduce the pressures on nature. We need to have positive contributions to nature. To do that, we need to find a way to both halt the loss of nature and reverse the loss of nature. So if that means some business actions about restoring, absolutely important, but we also need to stop the loss of nature as well. I'm not sure if I've answered that question or dodged it.
Thank you anyway. Right, well, we're running out of time, but I do just want to pick up one of the questions we got in advance, which was about engaging the supply chain. You've talked a bit about the need to do that, Nadine, but Tom, you've got some ideas maybe on how to get your hands dirty with your supply chain?
Well, Adrian mentioned a number of them, and I think the biggest thing there is to understand who your partners are or can be within the supply chains. First off, as Nadine says, understand where your supplies are coming from. That's a big one. I'm always surprised at the lack of knowledge many major companies have about where their products come from, where their raw materials come from. So I think that's a big one right there. You need to engage everybody in the supply chains. Don't be afraid of looking at all of those stakeholders, finding out who they are, talking to them. Remember that NBS has a societal benefit, should have a societal benefit. So how are you going to make their lives better? You know, you're going to have to do your due diligence about particular partners. I think you really need to, again, getting back to something I mentioned, what's the value proposition for everybody there? So it's different for, say, maybe a trader of a particular product versus the small farmer that produces that, that's just worried about making money this year or not losing money or losing a crop. So you really need to appeal to these people for them to understand how nature-based solutions are in their long-term benefit.
Okay, we are at time, so I thought we would just close by going around each of you and asking you for your top tip. So what would your top tip be for somebody who is struggling to persuade their colleagues to consider, let alone approve, an NBS project? Adrian, let's start with you.
It's so hard when it's a short session. I really would love to continue the discussion that Tom was raising there. But I think if you're needing to get a project approved and you're struggling to find the actual value proposition that's going to engage the approvers, I think you have to emphasize that there is a lot of stakeholder pressure that's coming very quickly in many geographies, in many regulations and legislations that will force the responsibility into your business. And this will enable you to show you're making progress much more quickly than just being demanded of it by regulation that's coming to be addressed. So and that learning will give you a better thing. So the broader challenge and what's coming down the pipeline will actually help emphasize why it's worth taking action now.
Nadine, what would your top tip be?
I think just, summarizing a thread what we've all been saying, but really, you know, yes, we're talking technically, but think about humans who are making these decisions at the end of the day. So really tailor your pitch, let's say, on what we're talking about nature-based solutions. Think about where they are on just sustainability in general and the links between climate and nature and people. So, and minute where they are, meet them where they are, raise their awareness, you know, make sure that they're willing to actually take action before then you come with the guidance on how to do it. And I think also, I mean, stories help convey a lot, right? And so I saw a great link just shared about some, you know, great a map of where different nature-based solutions are around in the world. So again, think they're so vast, nature-based solutions. So think specifically, what are we talking about here? Solutions to what? Find an example that's similar and then use that perhaps to communicate and to raise our awareness.
Finally, Tom, quickly, perhaps your top tip?
I would say thinking in terms of tailoring your message, the old slogan of what's in it for me, and think in terms of what is the value proposition for the person you're addressing, you're talking to, you're engaged with, and making sure that they can see how nature-based solutions will not only help the business, but will also help them, because they're probably in a very difficult position to try to push this forward. And then finally, if you're engaging with people in your supply chain, as I mentioned before, farmers, traders, all of these people have to have some benefit out of this for you to move it forward. That's just human nature. And I think that's how we're going to get it done.
Awesome. Well, we were tight on time. As you say, Adrian, there's loads sitting beneath this topic that we haven't got to today. But I'm just going to close with a reminder to you all about CISL's Get NBS Ready project and the output that will be coming in March. It's going to be a diagnostic that will hopefully help companies unlock investments in nature-based solutions within their value chain by making it easier, or less painful, should I say, for that first project to get approved by your company. So we've posted in the chat a link for you to sign up so that you can make sure that you're the first to know when that publication is out. With that, I'd just like to thank Adrian and Nadine and Tom for the very lively conversation we've had today. Obviously in LinkedIn, we can keep the chat going. Thank you all for participating. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.